Díaghuit agus fáilte chuig Aigreán na Dó sa Sra FleadhFest ó Gean Clothair. Coming up, we chat to Patricia Hayes and Carmel Connolly from Comhaltas CCE to find out how it all started and what the future holds for the branch. Tá an Gaeilge fíor tábhachtach anseo I Gundé Louth, and we speak to Ian Gear, chairperson of Crave Nabonia at the Jumping Church in RD. We speak to John McAvoy about the history of score here in the county. We visit Charlie Brodigan in Monaster Boyce, and he tells us all about the Round Tower and the unique high crosses. We then head to Dunleer to chat to Father Michael Murtha, where we find out all about the history of music in the area. And finally, we find out all about the Taunt and Cuchulainn from Paul Gosling and the Pogfather from Damien Callan. Seo é FleadhFest Gundé Louth. One of the three branches here in County Louth is Comhaltas CCE. We chat to Patricia Hayes and Carmel Connolly to find out how the branch started and what's in store for the future. Patricia, wonderful music there from Melissa and Noreen. So Rory Kennedy and JJ Gardner played a huge role in setting up the branch here in Dundalk. Can you tell me a little bit about them and your branch?
Rory Kennedy was an accordion player who was around in the 1950s, and Rory at that time played with the Untitled Chapter band, and what they played at the time was mostly tunes that were associated with Scottish tunes. In the 50s, Rory met up with a man called John Joe Gardner, who hailed from Sligo. John Joe was a fiddle player, he could also play the flute. And John Joe played very traditional Irish tunes. So that meeting was to have a big influence on Rory, who got very involved with the new traditional Irish tunes way of playing. So they played together in the Fleadh Cheoil band. Fleadh Cheoil band was formed in 1957, and they played at many different functions, were very, very well known round Dundalk. In 1958, then they formed, well, a few people at that time formed the Dundalgan branch. That had been the first branch, first cultural Éireann branch that was in Dundalk, and that was formed with Rory, a man called Sean Casey, Brendan Cochran and Eamon de Ball. So that was the first branch was formed in 1958. Rory then founded the JJ Gardner branch of Cultural Éireann in 1992. He continued to do the work he was doing with the children. Bands would be rehearsed, sometimes even 3 days a week if flahs were coming up. The bands would be under 12, under 15, under 18, so they had a lot of children involved. There could be several bands, under each age group. And my own children were involved at the time, and it was also a very social type of occasion, because as the children were practicing on stage, the parents would all be chatting together and we'd be catching up on all the latest news, and so it was a very social occasion. The children also got to see many parts of Ireland, which was great for them. They enjoyed every single part of Ireland. They did well in competition, both in bands and also individual, and would have brought home many medals. Sometimes they might have taken 100 medals home, which was great. It was hard going to. They had to get up there and strut their stuff, and Rory would make sure that they did it right. And if they didn't, you wouldn't be too far behind the door to come and say, yep, play that again. That wasn't right. So the J.J. Gardner branch were involved also with the setting up of a community employment scheme in the 90s. And the idea for that project was to do interviews with well-known musicians, storytellers, dancers, that type of thing, and to collate all of that information for an archive which would be set up later on. So we were able to talk to a lot of people who are no longer around now. So it's nice to have those interviews there for anybody to hear, and it was a good piece of work. Rory Kennedy died in 1993, and there was a memorial concert held for him in September 1996, which took place in the town hall, the Knock Town Hall. Laura Samorica, who is the Director General of Comhaltas Units, was present at that concert, and he gave a speech about Rory and all that Rory had done during those years. Rory was a great man for Irish culture and music, and also he was a fluent speaker of Irish himself. The J.J. Gardner branch has changed its name now to Cuchulainn. So there is a new committee and musicians involved in that, and that happened in 2019. And then to the teachers who were involved with J.J. Gardner over the years, and there would have been a few like Pauline White, Kevin O'Callaghan, Noreen Shields and Rose O'Connor. Now Rose was involved quite a long time with the branch. She taught a lot of children during her time, and her family was very musical. Rose learned to play the fiddle at a very young age. She later became involved with a couple of Ceilidh bands. One of them would be the Emery Ceilidh band. But Rose spent many years teaching, and also she was commended 2 different times, I suppose, for her contribution to passing on traditional music to the children. And she was the recipient of the Town Council Chairman's Award, and she also was nominated as People of the Year in 1993.
Carmel, you're extremely passionate about Ceilidh dancing here in Louth and across the country. Tell us, how did you become involved with the Cuchulainn branch?
So in 2010, Patricia Hayes got in touch with me to say that the Ceilidh dancing was being reintroduced into the Fleadh, and would I consider putting in a team. So that year we put in 2 forehands, one an all girls under 15 and one a mixed team under 12. Well, that little mixed team went on to become 3rd in the Fleadh in that year. So that started us back with the branch. We done that then every year, and right up until 2017, when we finally won an All-Ireland with a mixed team, and we have had great success with them. So in 2019 we had our last Fleadh, and since that J.J. Gardner has changed its name to Cuchulainn. So looking forward to 2022, to our next Fleadh, to the success that we've already had, to more success in the future with Cuchulainn.
I'm the chairperson of CCE Cuchulainn. We're a relatively new branch. We're based in the Mid-Louth section of the county, with members throughout the county. Due to the pandemic though, all our plans were put on hold. We did have, however, our online lessons and our online sessions. Now, we really look forward to having everybody back together again in person so that we can continue with our lessons, our sessions and our Ceilidhs.
A big thank you to Patricia and Carmel there from Cuchulainn CCE. Next up, we're heading off to the Jumping Church in RD to chat to Emer Nakir, Cahirlach, Crave Nabonia, Chunran na Gaeilge.
The night is long, love, the hours grow weary, youthful memories.
Emer, inis sin fin Gaelga an seo I Gundelu.
Tuso muid sús in Newdalgan agus an craobh corn na Gaelga atá an inis. Leir méle Niall Sloan, Rooney an craobh. Buníach craobh Gungalgan in 1890, sé blina tar éis bunú corn na Gaelga le ónmach níl agus dúglas de híide. Bhí golóir imachtaí ar siú lecha thar na blianta. Rangana, comórtasaí, hosí siad feis na bliana a dachraíoch ó áit go áit chuil blian. Bhí sé in áirdia I Susan O'Mead agus in Newdalgan freisin. Dóstal an craobh ardeis an conartha in níjig cúgjig don chéador agus is an a jair dúglas de híide as fust mar uachtrón an conartha rud a bhí an chun spóideach ag an am. Tháinig an ardeis arás I 2006. Dar le Niall, bhí bliant an a réit na dachatí nach raibh an craobh róláidir ach mar sin héin ní am ar bit an nach raibh an craobh ag feimú ón lá a chur ar buné. Craobh fadar ó dúhta an tanam atá an craobh inis, agus fear an simúl a bhí a gceist. Bhí sé ina gasar óg nar bunaíoch an craobh, agus ní raibh ólas ag bit aige I dtaobh na deanga go dtí gur bunaíoch é, agus is anna dólam sé a Gaeilge. Ceapa ina bhúnseir taiiste le, agus hiú sé timpeall ar rothair ag múna na Gaeilge agus an ceol dúchas. Ach an rud is iontaach ná d'aistrigh sé Bíbla go Gaeilge. Caith sé 2,000 ag déanamh agus na cuaigetí bhrun sé an saothar ar an taoiseach. Bhí sim sa lineacht aige, so níomh aistracán ó bháin é mar sin saothar alína a bhí symbólach agus alíonach a bhí a gceist.
Tá ceangal an láidir idir an star éarnach agus an Gaeilge an seo in áirdia. An féidir leat píos beag ólas a thuirtún faoi sin.
Yeah, bhálam leir libh faoi Joseph Dolan. Fear an simúl a bhí nasc aige leis an Gaeilge agus an cultúr an seo in áirdia. Leir mé le Paddy Lynch, alíontóir agus múntóir tá airí as inis agus thug sé léargás iontacht dom faoin bhar. Rugadh Joseph Dolan in 1870, philanthropist a ba é agus a más rudí eile bhí an sim aige I gcursaí teanga. So bhí sé páirteach leis an chlóiste saoire ag an clochar agus sús in ómé freisin, agus bhí sé mar Rooney ar an North Leid Comhaltas Cantor. Ach an rud is mó a hasamach ná an ceangal a bhí idir Joseph Dolan agus Porcamach Pierce, an tír gráthóir agus an réamh lódaí. So ag tús an féhís, nar bhí an Pierceigh ag éirí scoléine a bhunaigh chun éideachas Gaeilgeacha a chur fáil de fáistí, scríomh an Pierceigh litir hic Dolan chun íosaachta áil chun an scoil a bhhainnig. Thug Dolan an targaid dó agus bhí siad chun aige leis an mórd gobanéirí. So ceap mé gur an scéil sin an samúil mar is aspáile airdi mé freisin, inis tá plac cuimhnachán an seo sáile ina ónéir.
Agus an sin ag bogad ará godaí drithatha an bhfuil Gaeilge láidir sios in rithatha?
Golóir Gaeilge in rithatha agus bhís na blianta ó hin freisin, leir mé le Tomás ó hoci, fear an fashionanta agus réamh gníomhach a caiith is éile obair is son na Gaeilge. Sa seascadí bhainnig Tomás agus cuid eile craobh chun na Gaeilge, craobh gamnach na gír an tanam a bhí ar agus rinne si golóir rudaí thar na blianta. Bhí rangan acu, céala acu, hosí si féle brithatha agus féle chréide, dó is léir greibh an dó agriach fitte fúte díoch an tús. Dóstal siad ardeis an conartha I 1968 ach an rud is iontaach a dhearna Tomás le ceithre ón craobh ná Gaelscoil a chosú sa cantar. Ag tús na hoptatí, bunig scoil éangasach le deithnar páistí agus inis tá breis agus gáchéad fáistí ag fólam trí Gaeilge.
Agus tá craobh nua bunathe agah inis in rithatha, cad é an scéal an sin?
So bhí mé agus cúpla eile páirteach le Fleadh Cheoil na hÉir nar bhí sé in rithatha. Agus an sin thugad mar faoi dearg go raibh golóir Gaeilge sa baile. Bhí golóir daoine sásta an Gaeilge a úsáid is a cleachta. Bhí fun ar an rud éigean a dhéanamh chun gach duine a tharraingt isteach sa phobal Gaeilge. Mar sin, bhunaigh muid craobh na bóine, craobh conan na Gaeilge sa baile. Bhí sé 6 Jackar mar tháinig an vírus cúplamíní ag sin agus bhí sé Jackar craobh nua a chur chun cín, ach fós landmór raig agus tásúla an go mbeidh modóbalta a bhádí smó dhéanamh sa teici. Mar dearan teanna batha teanga í a leirt agus ceapan ghfuil golóir daoine sásta an teanga úsáid go háirithe an seo ag an bhéilú.
Emer, gur míle mágad as sin bhí sé sin go híntaach. I'm really looking forward now to taking a look around this jumping church here in Ardee. Gur míle mágad as ucht sin, Emer. Isn't it fantastic to see that the Irish language is still alive and strong here in the county? So next up, we're heading off to Termonfeckin to chat to John McAvoy all about Score. John, tell us how you became involved in Score.
It all started from my involvement with the GAA. Score was a GAA competition that was set up to promote, the Irish culture, dance and music, song, etc. The club originally, I think 1970 it started, got involved in a few of the competitions. We were, recitation, I probably said a recitation myself. And then a few years later, late 70s, we decided at that stage that to enter in every competition. There was 8 competitions, including Ceilidh dancing, set dancing, and set dancing hadn't been heard of. Nobody knew much about set dancing, and we were actually, Sheila and myself was at a competition, score competition, a few years previous to that, and all the teams that danced in the Leinster was disqualified because they were dancing a Ceilidh dance. So we decided we'd enter in everything, including set dancing. We got a lady out from Drogheda, Barbara Byrne, she was a Ceilidh dancing teacher, but she knew the Kerry set, and she came out and we got a team together, and that's where we started, was with the Kerry set.
Were there many other clubs involved in score within Louth?
Probably 12, 16, maybe some in and some out. Naomh Pádraig was the club that probably we had the greatest rivalry with set dance, and they started around the same time as us. They had a half set, was the first thing they entered in. But over the years, we built up great friendships and great connection with Naomh Pádraig Club, and it was through the rivalry and the friendliness that set dancing brought to it,
Louth was very successful with Leinster and All-Ireland wins in score as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about those wins?
The Plunkets were lucky enough to go on and win in All-Ireland. They had a very successful team. We never achieved that, but we did win a number of Leinsters. But the county overall had success at score and Ogue and senior score. I won't be able to tell you all, but I know St Mary's had a winner with the Irish Ornoch, the recitation. Kilkerley Emmets would have had a very successful score and Ogue Ceilidh dancing team that did win in All Ireland. But there was great numbers taking part, and a lot of the teams were successful enough to get to Leinster finals and All Ireland finals, and some success. And I remember an All Ireland final in Galway. I think Kilkerley won the Ceilidh dancing score and Ogue, and the late Joe McDonagh, who went on to be president of the association, was the Faratee that night.
What have your fondest memories been of the years in score?
There was one incident I remember. We were all on the bus heading for the Olympia in Dublin for a Leinster final, and we had there was a great man that was very involved with us at that time, on Brother O'Farrell. He was a Christian brother in Dundalk, but himself and his friend were heading up where I was on the bus, and one said to the other and something about the Tikedi, and the Tikedi were a Walya, but I think because of the collar he was able to get in. He didn't have to produce the ticket. Where are we today? We're still dancing. About 2002 or 3, we started up a weekend in Greenon, a set dancing weekend. These set dancing weekends happen all over the world. Germany, France, America. These set dancing weekends are happening, and we'd have been to some. We've been to Germany a few times, and we've been to Copenhagen. We've been to a few different places, but we decided we'd start one of our own, and that's 18, 19 years ago, and people have come from all over the world really. We've had people from America booked in, and we've had some from Japan and all over Europe. But we also, if I could mention, we wrote a set ourselves, Sheila, myself and a friend from North Dublin, Mairead Devan. We wrote a set, could be 10 years ago now, maybe a little more, called the Rinkenstown set. And Rinke, as you know, is the Irish for dance. Balla Rinkin Rinkenstown, and that was about 10 years ago, maybe a little more, and that dance now has been danced in every continent in the world. It kind of has put us on the map, if you like, the area, and and it'll be there for generations to come, and we feel very proud to have that there as a legacy maybe when we're all gone.
Gur míle magat as sin, John, and continued success in score competitions for Louth in the future. Now, our wee county is steeped in history, and Monster Boyce is famous for its round tower and high crosses. Next up, we chat to Charlie Brodigan, a local tour guide with an in-depth knowledge of the area.
Well, here you are standing at Wereduck's Cross in Monster Boyce. It's a monastery that was founded here in the late 6th century by a man called Boyce, or as his Irish name would be Buita. So the place came to be known as Monster Boyce. The monastery would have flourished here between the early 6th century, then right through to the 12th century. There are a number of abbots recorded, and two of these abbots were called Wereduck. One was in the early 8th century. Another one was in the 10th century. This abbot called Wereduck is believed to be the one whom this cross here, Wereduck's Cross, was made to celebrate. It's a scriptural cross. On the east side facing us are passages of the Old Testament, where we have Cain and Abel and David and Goliath. This is Moses in the desert. And here we have Mary holding the baby Jesus. On the New Testament side then we've got the Garden of Gethsemane scene, and we have the Doubting Thomas scene. Quite an easy cross to describe. If we move on then, we move on to the tower. Tower was built as both a bell tower, a watchtower, a repository for valuables, which unfortunately came to be a problem then, because in 1097 there was a bad fire in which nearly all of the valuables, all of the paperwork, all of the books, and a lot of the valuable chalices and whatever they had was destroyed in the fire. Also within about 2 kilometres from here we have another cross in the edge of the parish in Killinear, and this one was erected to commemorate the visit of Pope John Paul, or Saint John Paul now, in 1979. The cross that was erected there was the cross that was used at the Mass on the altar. So the Pope arrived there on a Saturday afternoon to massive excitement. Like the excitement building up to it for the previous week or two was it was sort of unknown, because nobody knew it was starting with a very small event, and then it got larger and larger. And the Pope arrived in by helicopter, and Mass was there. The Papal Cross is located along the side of the R132, as it's now known, but at the time it was done, that would have been the main N1 Dublin-Belfast road. It's quite an area of, I suppose, pilgrimage to a lot of people, especially around the time when the Pope died, and the anniversary of his visits, usually every September. September 29th every year, there's generally a service held there. Quite a lot of people have devotion to St. John Paul now, so there's quite a lot of small tokens, small little flowers being left there, and people tend the flowers and come to it on a pretty regular basis.
Thank you, Charlie, for sharing that information. Monster Boyce is definitely a place to visit. So next up, we're off to Dunleer, where we chat to Father Michael Murtha about the history, music and culture in the area. Father, we're here in Dunleer, a town rich in history and culture.
Yes, Dunleer is at the heart of the county, and it is of course a monastic settlement. It's Lan Lera, as in the monastic enclosure of Lera, later became Dún Lera, or the Fort of Lera, and it has a very rich heritage both in buildings, in monuments, and in musical history and in literature as well. And of course, right up to the present time, we have Scoireacht, which is a very active organisation and premises, promoting Irish language, dance, music. And we still have quite an interest in the Irish language, particularly because of one of my predecessors, Father Larry Murray, who died in the 1940s, but who was instrumental in many movements within the Irish language movement, and particularly the founding of Gaeltachts, first of all in Omeath and later in Ranafast. The tradition is very strong and very deep. The parish priest in the very early 1800s was a Father Healy, and he spoke to the people in Irish, and his sermons are still extant. They were written phonetically, curiously, and they're in the library in Louth. So right back to pre-famine, people were speaking Irish, despite the fact that we're in the Pale, and despite the fact that the tradition of the Anglo-Norman people was very strong here as well. But our place names too are very rich, and we have, for example, Skibblemore is the townland where the Scoireacht is located, and sometimes it's called Big Barn, but more often it's called Skibblemore. And we have all kinds of very beautiful and very musical place names in the locality as well, which show that the Irish language particularly has still left its trace and mark in the locality.
And can you talk us through the history of music in the area?
The history of Irish music in the area is very strong. In the south of the county there was a very active harp movement, and people, indeed a priest, a Dominican priest, was active in the harping tradition and the recording of harp music and so on. But here in Dunleer, for example, the musical groups that we have took off really in the early 1900s because of the temperance movement, and there were many different fife and drum bands which were very popular at the time rather. And of course the Gaelic League encouraged all these things, and we had a tradition of the open air fashion, or the Aerojacht, and we have some photographs of that too. And the bands from the early 1900s sadly were broken up because of the trouble at the time. The equipment was said to have been destroyed by the Black and Tans in a raid on the Hall, which is quite close to where we're speaking from. And those bands disappeared really in the early days of the state. And they were revived again in the 70s and 80s, but again they have disappeared. A much longer tradition of band music and concert band music began in Ardee, and as many of those movements did in bands, and indeed organ music and church music as well, it began because of the influx of German and Belgian music teachers and organists. So Ardee had Herr Roth, who was a German, and here in Dunleer we had an Irish lady who played the organ, and we had a very active choir who won the Cuchulainn Shield in the 1930s, for example. And the Irish music particularly has taken off in the last 30-40 years because of Scoireacht. So it's been active not just in Dunleer but in Mid Louth and South Louth, and of course in North Louth in the Dundalk area for a long time. And again, despite the fact that we're firmly in the Pale, the native traditions are very, very strong, and we still have an intense interest in the Irish language in the schools.
And can you bring us up to date now on the Irish language and culture in Dunleer?
We have right now a video project going on because of the restrictions. Our choir is not able to meet, for example, here in the parish. And we have Dahi Carney, who is a lecturer in music in the college in Dundalk in DKIT. And he's bringing all the different groups together from the schools, from the primary school and from Scullyworry, which is the secondary school. And they're putting together, through modern technology, a recording of one of his own compositions, which is called St. Bridget's Cloak. And that brings in, of course, St. Bridget, who is very much associated with Dunleer. But Scurriocht, of course, are keeping the traditions alive, and the Irish language is still very strong. We had a teacher who taught in RD in his final decades, Parhalan McGillicuddy, Bartle Woods, who died sadly in recent years. And Bartle and many, many others have been teaching young people in the Scurriocht. And we have, of course, Brendan McCraner is an uilleann piper who's from the town as well. And we still are producing many, many very fine musicians and even more fine teachers of music. And the tradition is continuing even into the digital age and in the digital form.
Thank you, Father Michael, for that great insight on Dunleer's wealth of talent, both past and present. Now, the Táin Bó Cúailnge, or the Cattle Raid of Cooley, is the great epic of Ireland and is believed to be based on events here in Ireland from around 500 BC. The Táin is a central story in a long battle between Connacht and Ulster, and here to tell us more about it is archaeologist and writer Paul Gosling, and later on we'll be chatting to Damien Callan all about the Pogfather.
Táin Bó Cúailnge, or the Cattle Raid of Cooley, is an epic story set in an Ireland which is not Christian and is not urban. Everything is rural, everything is pagan. It's a story about kings, queens, warriors and ruffians on an epic scale. It's set about the time of Christ. Cuchulainn, his death is sometimes linked in the annals to the story of Mary, the mother of Christ, that they die about the same time. So just after or about the time of Christ's life. And the season is winter. The Táin begins on the Monday after the Feast of Samhain, which is Halloween. And Cuchulainn complains vociferously to his charioteer that he has been defending Cooley, or Cúailnge, from the ravages of Queen Maeve and her army, and they have now passed Imbolc, which is St. Bridget's Day. So on every scale, including the fact that thousands of people die, including the fact that women are treated with abject cruelty, this is a gore fest on a huge scale. And it's comparable in terms of European literature to stories such as the Beowulf, which is one of the great texts of Anglo-Saxon literature, and to the epic stories, classical stories of Greece and Rome. And Odysseus is sometimes compared to the leading figure in the Táin, who is, of course, Cuchulainn, who is the son of Ulster, conceived of a god called Louth, after which County Louth is named, but is fostered by his parents at Dundalgan, which is now Dundalk today. And Cuchullin's Castle, of course, is the great landmark on the west side of Dundalgan, Dundalk, where was his home place. And the big theme of the story is about the capture and possession of bulls. One bull resides in Connacht and is belonging to Queen Maeve's husband, Alil, and the other bull in the story is the brown bull of Cooley, Dun Coolinya, the Brown of Cooley, and he resides with his owner, Dara Macfiachna, in South Ulster, South Armagh, but uses the upland pastures of Cooley. The story is important for Louth because it name checks dozens of places, which means that Louth possesses this story in a way in which no other region of Ireland owns the story. So you can start on the Louth-Meath border with a place like Smarmore, mentioned in the Táin, and supposed to result from a name meaning gore fest, basically a blood fest, a vat of blood and guts. And then you come to the famous town of Ardea, named for the battle between Cuchulainn and his foster brother Ferdia. As you move up through the Louth itself, you come to Louth, the village, which is famous because of its St. Machta's house, but it's mentioned in the Táin as if it is some kind of a sacred space. And the whole county is named from this tiny little village, which is of interest in itself. And then when you get to Dundalgan, of course, you proceed across the Castletown River, which is the River Knee in the Táin, and you come to Fahart at the gateway into the Gap of the North. And not only are all these names in the Táin, not only are these place names in Louth today familiar to every school child and adult in the county, but they're also full of what are called etymological explanations. Now, it's not etymology in terms of where did the word come from on a scientific basis. It's etymology on the basis of a fantastic story. So Fahart is derived from Fóchert, meaning great throw or heroic feat. And these are word plays that the scribes who composed the Táin would have delighted their audience through punning, effectively. Even many of the names in the Táin are playful. King Conor of Ulster, or Concobar as he's known in the Táin, I think his name is derived as something like, son of wolf, mother of otter. There's a play on words, which people at the time would have got. It's kind of lost on us because we've raised these names to a heroic status. My particular interest in the Táin has been always on the place names. And Cooley is replete with place names, like the river, the big river at Riverstown in Cooley, which you traverse now seamlessly past the site of the old Cooley distillery as you go to Carlingford. It's called the River Cron, and the River Cron rises up against the army of Queen Maeve. It places itself in alliance with Cuchulainn. In other words, the actual landscape of Cooley resists the intrusion of Queen Maeve. And not only does that river rise up and drown her warriors, but the river at Omeath also does the same, what is called the Ryland River today. It's called the Culpa. And as the armies traverse through Cooley, they cross over close to Claremont Cairn, where the telecommunications mast is today, which is on the skyline of Cooley. Everybody knows it. And then they descend into Ravensdale Valley and they meet a third river, which we call the Flurry, but then was known as the Shechera. But because of the fact that the river rose up and resisted Queen Maeve again, the name is transferred, it's changed to the river, the Glasgatlig. Glas is an Ulster dialect word for a stream. So these rivers are resisting Queen Maeve as much as the lone warrior Cuchulainn. So it is absolutely epic. It's very inventive in terms of storytelling. And it is comparable to anything that you'll pick up in any of the modern movies or even the shoot 'em up games that you'll get online in terms of the heroes, you know, that you get of the comic books of the 20th century.
So Damien, tell us, how did you get involved in the Pogfather?
Yeah, well, basically, I came from Fatima, and it was a housing estate just outside of Dundalk, and in the parish of Faughart. And as a young lad at 13 years of age, we were very lucky that a priest came into the parish at that time, a very young man called Paul McShawn, who started up, and he was very into this Irish culture, and he wanted to have hurling as the main sporting game in the area. Now Fatima would have been a very young estate, a lot of young families, so like the population was there, and of course Tahoe was like any game, I suppose, that anybody was going to start at that time was always going to be very popular, but he in particular wanted to start hurling. But there was one evening we were down on the Bonchuk, which was the little pitch that our training ground and our own little pitch, and there was a couple of us looking across. We could see the Cooley peaks from where we were training, and it was just at the time, I suppose, we were learning a bit about young Setanta and Cuchulainn and that sort of folklore. And one of the lads just happened to say, well, you know, when Setanta was mentioned, we knew that he had a hurl, and he pucked the ball from Dundalgan to Ardwalker. And we were just thinking ourselves as being young Setantas. So anyway, look, the story goes that one lad just said, well, I could puck a ball we'd say in 30 pucks from that peak to the other peak. So it was kind of overheard by Antara, and he thought it was a good idea, and he thought about it. So, you know, he just really went, and he posted it up in the Bohan or the Showmarie at the time. Everything was asked Gaelge, like we had the Bohan, we had the Bonchuk, the Showmarie. Well, anyway, there was a notice put up that anybody would like to maybe take on with doing this Pogfather over on these peaks. And we didn't have, we could see them, but we hadn't a clue where they were. And we came out anyway, look, and we climbed the mountain, and we done the competition, and like we enjoyed our day. But we really didn't think an awful lot about the whole thing until the following week. One of the lads' mother was coming out of the shop. I can remember it to this day, and we were playing in the green in front of the shop, and she was waving the newspaper and she's shouting down the street, "Oh, our boys are in the paper."
So Damien, how does it work?
Well, basically how it works is, on the course itself, you have these yellow markers, right? And you must puck the ball as far as you can on the course, which is, you know, what you will is yellow markers. And you have your team in front. You'll have what you call a mwere and a gully and a gasog, and they will mark your card. And you go round the mountain hitting like that, and whoever comes here at the least number of pucks and furthest distance over the line is deemed the winner. Lovely.
Oh, I hit it! Well, they say practice makes perfect, so I guess I'll just have to keep trying. That's all from us for this episode, so good day on Cade Igron Ella, Slán go fóill.